Good evening, everyone. My name is Sherry Mayberry, and I'm a partner with GWIZ Education, and I want to welcome all of you tonight to our Making Math Meaningful webinar, which should run about an hour and a half. Beth Smith is going to be our trainer tonight, and we have a lot of material to cover. So we do want to get started quickly or very soon. But I do just want to review a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. Up in the top right-hand corner of your screen, you should have already chosen the computer audio or your phone call. And if you do the phone call, that's fine. It doesn't matter. We just want to make sure that you have audio. The next thing is right below that, there are two handouts. One, the PowerPoint that you're seeing right now on your screen, and the other is a link to the post-quiz assessment. Both of those are on our website, so if you haven't done it now, don't worry about it. You can access that material right after the webinar. Below that is a question / chat box, and in there, during the webinar, you can send a question to us and we will try to answer. And then also, Beth likes to make the webinars very interactive, so she's going to be asking you questions and ask you to participate. And that's where you can respond, and we can share your notes, your contributions, your thoughts, your ideas with everyone else that's on the webinar tonight. So anyway, with that said, we've got about half people that are customers, half people that are not, but I think that most of you will really enjoy this webinar, and hopefully you'll have some good thoughts to take back. So with that, we're going to get started, and we'll turn it over to Beth.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I know, especially with this time change we just had, it's rough in the evenings. But hopefully you'll find this helpful. And also, my goal for you is that you will walk away tonight with ideas that you can actually use tomorrow. Math is a really important topic in today's world. And sometimes, especially you all, I'm sure, run up against some controversy with parents who think that math should be something that's on a worksheet. We'll talk about that actually. But the goal of this is to help you see how math can be a part of everything you do all day long, and to help children see how much people in their daily lives use math. So we are going to have a lot of times for interaction. As Sherry said, where you can type your ideas in the question box. We may even try to do some unmuting. We've had trouble with that in the past, but GoToWebinar says they've fixed it, but we'll try and see. So with that, I would like to get started. If you have any questions along the way, please type them in the question box. If it's something Sherry can answer related to how this is working, your audio is not working or whatever, she can try to help you behind the scenes. But if it's something related to what I'm talking about, I'm going to be stopping periodically and she can read those questions off to me and I'll do my best to answer them. So with that said, making math meaningful. First thing we're going to do is actually practice typing in the question box. And we're going to start with a question. What does math mean to you? So what I would like you to do is in the question box, type what math personally means to you. And then Sherry we'll have Sherry share some of them. We have a lot of people on this webinar tonight, so if we don't read off your answer, it's not because it doesn't matter. It's just because we can't read everybody's answer to every question, or we will all be here till midnight. And I don't know about you, but I think I'd fall asleep. So Sherry, you can read off the responses as they come in.
We are getting some already. The first is an interesting answer is business. We've got solving problems with numbers, equations. It fits into every aspect of life, numbers and formulas, counting, sorting, and quantity. Math is finite, meaningful, and non-disputable. I like that. Numbers, every day, all day. Wow, lots, colors and shapes. Math means numbers with meaning. Math is a very important part of my day-to-day, fits into everyday life. Math is money. Math is the future. Math occurs in nature. Being able to handle numbers and awareness of how things fit. Math equals fun. Math is a fun way to teach children concepts of the whys of life. Math is life. Math put man on the moon. All those are great answers. I think
They
you
are
get the
great.
hint. And thank you for being so prompt with your answers. That's great.
Yes, we'll keep moving along. I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. They were all great ideas, and I love to hear that you have a very broad idea of what math is, because that's going to play a lot into what we're going to talk about tonight. So someone mentioned this, that, and actually several people did, that math is a part of your daily life, and it's so true. For example, when you're preparing food and you're following a recipe, you're using measurement. When you're paying bills or balancing the checkbook, you're using math. When you calculate a tip at a restaurant, you use math. When you are staying healthy, and for some of us, getting on the scale isn't always pleasant, but it's important. Reading a thermometer to check to see if a child has a temperature, your heart rate, counting calories, all of those things involve math. Whether reading a thermometer, time, reading a clock. Somebody mentioned this one, running a business, the financials of running a business, your taxes, your budget, all of those things involve math and price comparisons. This is a pet peeve of mine, because I feel like sometimes in today's world, especially, I have two children now in college who went through high school, and I think about, okay, why are we worrying about calculus when people can't go to the grocery store and figure out what's the better deal in terms of what's on sale versus the big size and the small size? And so price comparison is really important. So the point here is that we all use math in your daily lives every day. So what I would like you to do is, again, we're going to type in the question box, and I would like you to answer the question of, name one way that you use math in your daily life. It can be something that I have here, something else that you've thought of, because there's probably 1,000 different ways that people use math.
The last one that, or one that came in that I didn't get to read, was math makes me nervous because I was never good at it. I think that's a feeling a lot of people sometimes have. Okay, here we go. Family budget of 7. Uh, Cooking, counting children, counting toys, baking, time clock, counting tuition. When tracking numbers of children at school, praying I have enough money to pay the bills on time.
I'm sure a
Engineering,
lot of people can relate to that, including myself.
engineering scales reading, counting kids in the classroom and splitting groups, grocery shopping, food counts. Wow, we just got all kinds of responses. Counting ratios at work, balancing checkbook, my home daycare, um, calorie intake for my diet, mileage, budgeting family budget and business budget, paying bills. Those are all great answers.
They're all excellent answers. And as you can see, there are so many different ways that we all use math as part of our daily lives. And part of this webinar is helping children see that as well, and pointing it out. Maybe when you're doing some of those things, like when you're preparing a recipe and you're following it and you're measuring things in measuring cups, or when you are, for instance, counting the number of children that are there that day, and putting it down in your record book. All of those ways are ways that you can help children see how you use math every day. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next slide. Thanks, Sherry. Why is math important? Well, there's a lot of research behind why math is important, and this is just one quote from a study about math. And it talks about, I want to point out right here where it says, these positive experiences help children develop dispositions such as curiosity, imagination, flexibility, inventiveness, and persistence, which contribute to their future success in and out of school. And I think that all of us on the call would agree that those are characteristics that we would wish for any of our children, that they would have persistence, that they would use their imaginations. And it talks about how when children have a positive beginning with math, that it gives them confidence in math, and that I can do it attitude, kind of like the little engine that could. There's also a lot of research out right now about what's called a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And in a fixed mindset, you would have a child, or you would hear a child saying, "Oh, I can't do that. I'm not good at math." In a growth mindset, they might say, I can't do that right now. I can't do it yet, but I will. And the growth mindset is all about how giving children the confidence that you can learn anything, that your brain is pliable and plastic, and it can be molded, and you can add all kinds of information in there. You might never enjoy math, my daughter, um, and it may not be the best subject that you do, but the bottom line is that you can learn lots of things. So that plays in here with a growth mindset that, anything is possible. And with patience, with practice, with repetition, that it is possible for you to learn new things, especially in math. So take a minute and think about your early experiences with math. Were they positive or negative? Sherry's going to launch a poll, so you won't see my screen in a second, but I want you to answer the poll whether your early experiences with math, and for most of you that might be preschool, or it might even be kindergarten, might be your first big experience with math. Was it positive or negative? So Sherry, you can launch the poll, and everybody will give you a minute or so to answer, to put your choice in there, and then Sherry will share how the poll came out, and we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was talking and forgot to unmute myself. I was just running. I am so sorry. What I was sharing with you all was that about 80% of the people have voted. We got about 70% positive, 30% negative so far. And you guys are really Johnny on the spot voting, which appreciate that. That helps us move along much faster. So right now, Beth, we've got over 85%
Okay,
folks have
I think
voted.
that's great. Great.
70 is 71 positive, 29% negative. So that's
Okay.
a really, I'm impressed. Yeah.
Well, the point of doing that was to lead into the second question here about how did these experiences affect your confidence and your ability to do math? So my guess would be that if you were one of those people that said you had a negative experience with math at an early age, that probably your confidence level with math isn't as high as maybe some of those of you who said you'd had positive experiences with math when you were at an early age. So what I'd like to do right now is we're going to attempt this. If you would like to share a little bit about your early experience with math, positive or negative, there's a little hand that you can click, and we will need to unmute you, and then you will also need to unmute you, and we'll see if we can get someone to actually share out loud, which would be really, really cool. And if not, that's okay, but I figured this would be a good question that somebody might want to share their experience.
Yeah, so if you raise your hand, I can see it. We do have someone. Um, I believe I can pronounce it, Genevieve Benson. So I'm gonna click to unmute you, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing your name, but if you can, let's see, one second. Um, okay, I do. So you should be unmuted if you click and unmute yourself. I've got you unmuted on this end. Genevieve, Miss Beeson, can we hear you?
Hello?
Hi, hi.
Hello, we can hear you.
What
Great.
you ask, what was my my negativity towards math when I was younger?
Yeah.
I feared it. I ended up being good at it, but when I was younger, I just feared it, so I froze up and I wasn't as interested in it as a positive person would have been.
And why do you
Oh,
think you feared it so much? What was the fear about?
I think just the counting in general, it just was something that I wasn't feeling.
was it
Hmm.
fear of failure, you think?
Yeah,
Okay.
And I think
yeah.
that's true for a lot of people. Math is very abstract and it can be challenging. And there's a lot of pressure on children to be good at everything these days. And so sometimes when it's just not something that clicks right away, It
Correct.
can be very much like that. You're very, you're just scared. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much for
Yeah.
sharing, and we're so glad it worked to unmute you. So now you should be able just to click your button to mute yourself, and we'll mute you again. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
And we have one more hand raised. If we can get this to work, Cheryl Moss. Cheryl, I'm going to unmute you, and then you will need to unmute yourself. Cheryl? Cheryl?
Yes, can you hear me?
We
Yes,
can
we
hear you.
can.
Yeah.
Yay!
Okay. I mean, I had good experience with math, and even to this day, I kind of love math. But I can remember growing up, because there were a lot of us growing up in my family, that my father he would always pay us for our report cards. And back then, it was like 15 cents for an A and 10 cents for a B and different things like that. But,
Right.
it allowed us to learn how to count and everything and count our money. And then he used to make root beer pop. And then we had to buy the pop from him. If we wanted it.
Ah, okay.
So, I mean, and then once again, it might have been 5 cents. So it was 10 cents or something for a bottle, but
Right.
it taught you math skills. And then as we grew up, our parents always had a variety of games for us, and we didn't realize how much it sharpened our mental math and things like that. But um, just the board games from Sell of the Century to different things like that, to Let's Make a Deal, all those type of games that required mathematical skills. And it
Excellent.
was mental math that we end up having to do.
And you were
Mhm.
practicing it and having fun at the same time.
Practicing, yes, exactly. And that's one of my strengths. And, to this day, we personally have a concession trailer that I tell my husband, look, do not send me any kids that cannot do any mental math, because we raised our kids on doing mental math.
Hmm.
And so I don't even use a cash register in there, and we keep it at, dollar increments, so that the help and it helped our children.
Well, I'm sure it did. And that was real,
You
and
know,
that was real life math too, right?
yes, yes, real life math. And so, and when I talk to children, young, teenagers, that they want to help me. If you can do mental math, you can help me. You cannot do mental math, I can't use your help.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And I'm so glad you had such a positive experience with math at an early age. That's just wonderful.
Thank,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Okay, I just muted you back. So,
All right.
um,
Wonderful.
thank
Well, I'm
you.
glad that we got this to work. So we're gonna try that again here in just a few slides. But it's so nice to hear, both sides of the story, because how that impacts the way you work with children is, whether you realize it or not, there's if you had a bad experience with math and you feel like you're not very good at math, then that might not be something that you are really excited about doing with the children, because it's not comfortable for you. Um, on the flip side, if you're very good in math, then that might be something that you would be doing more with the children. So just keeping in mind where your head is and how your experiences play into the way that you plan experiences for children is super important. Oops, now I went too far. Let's go back. All right, math should be fun, and she just brought that up, which was a perfect transition. She must have known what slide was coming next. Um, there's a lot of research out there about playful math. And playful math is exactly what she was talking about, where she was talking about games that were involving math, or activities where the children are actually utilizing math and they may not realize that. And I love this quote because it talks about how, and this would be a great one to share. Unfortunately, I know this happens not all the time, but it does happen. I've taught kindergarten. I get it, where you have a parent that thinks that if it doesn't come home on a sheet of paper, they didn't learn anything, which is super frustrating for those of us in early childhood. But there's abundant research that has demonstrated that young children enjoy learning math and can learn far more than was previously assumed without a single flashcard or a worksheet. And so that is a quote that you may want to share, and it's from the National Research Council, so really legit. This is not fake news. This is even down here if you want to cite it. But it is very important to let parents and guardians know that just because they do not see a worksheet with math on it does not mean that their children are not learning math when they're in your program. In fact, they are probably doing even more math because they're engaged in activities that promote math in many different ways and in many different areas than they would be if they were in fact doing quote unquote a worksheet. There becomes a time when children are older where there's a lot of controversy right now actually about multiplication tables, believe it or not, where they are, this is in elementary school in my area, where they are not necessarily having children memorize their multiplication facts. They're teaching them what multiplication means, but they're never taking it to the step where they have to memorize the facts. And I can attest that they need to understand what it means to multiply, but at the same time, the multiplication tables become very important when you get into high school and you're in algebra or you're in trigonometry and you need to know what 7 times 8 is, boom, just like that. I had a daughter who did not because she went through a phase like that where they didn't teach multiplication tables. So again, but at early childhood level, at the level that you are working with children, it needs to be hands-on. It needs to be a part of experiences. It needs to be fun. And then children aren't afraid of it. It's not, think about how abstract a numeral looks to, say, a 3-year-old, right? That's a very, very confusing concept. Like, okay, that weird squiggly thing is called a number, and that weird squiggly thing means something. I mean, those are big ideas. So you have to start small to get to the point where children can understand that there's a numeral. Like if I have a set of 3, blocks, there's a numeral that matches, and that's called a set. And there's this numeral thing that matches that. I mean, that's a big idea. Okay, so keeping in mind the hands-on is so important, and that math is very much an area where you're going to build. You're going to build, and you're also going to come back around again, and then you're going to build, and you're going to come back around again, and build and back around again. So, did you know that active games are an excellent way to help children learn math? Moving and math go hand in hand. There's also a lot of research about music and math and how children who are involved with music tend to be more mathematically inclined, which totally makes sense because any of you on the call that are musicians will know you count when you're playing an instrument or you're playing the piano, and every note has a certain number of beats and there's a time signature, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of math and patterning and rhythm and a whole lot of things that go on in music. So I can think of several different games that I used to play with my children that involved math, but I'd like to hear from you. So in the question box, type the name of a game you play with children that involves math, keeping in mind that math is not just numerals. We're going to get to that in the next slide.
Trouble. I'm pretty sure that's a board game, I believe.
Yes, it is.
Aggravation. Hi-ho Cheerio.
Oh my gosh, I love that game.
Can just be at the Play-Doh table.
Yep.
Uno. Monopoly. I was so bad at Monopoly. Bingo. Yahtzee. Ants Go Marching. I love that song. Puzzles. Hi-ho Cheerio. Candyland. Shoots and Ladders. Simon Says. Hopscotch. Scrabble. Dice. Rummikub. Connect 4.
Lots of great games, board games. Now think of some too that are active. Gross motor games. What gross motor games could you play with children? I think somebody mentioned hopscotch. That's a good one. And the ants go marching, I'm assuming acting out that song. That's a good one. Anybody have any other ideas for active games, for gross motor games?
Oh, here we go. Musical chairs. Hide and seek. Beanbag toss. High 4 square. H4 square. Okay. Jump rope. 4 square. That's it.
Yep.
Freeze tag. Duck, duck, goose, tic tac toe, musical chairs. Again, those are all
Yep.
very active.
Very active. And that's the point. You want children moving when they're doing some of these things, because as they move, then it sinks in, I guess you could say, more. So one I was thinking about was actually Simon Says. Simon Says can be a great game to play with children to reinforce math in many different areas. So obviously you could say Simon Says, pat your tummy 2 times, but you can also say things like Simon Says, go around the table, or Simon Says, crawl under the table. So you incorporate positional concepts. Simon Says, find something in this room that is the shape of a square, right? So there's lots of different ways you can incorporate different aspects of math into a game like Simon Says. Follow the leader would be another one. So very good. Great, 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 great ideas. I really love everybody participating. It makes this so much more enjoyable for all of you, and for me too, and for Sherry. All right, so, oh, again, I hit my button twice. Sorry. A lot of you will be very familiar with your state standards of early childhood education, which in every state has a slightly different title, but in having looked at all the state standards in the United States of America and the Head Start standards, I can tell you that pretty much they all say the same thing. But we're going to call this, because in our curriculum we call math knowledge, and these are the areas that fall under the umbrella of math knowledge. So for most of you in your state standards, you're going to have a section, and in some states it might just say cognition, it might just say math, it might say mathematical skills. Again, it's different in every state, but the areas listed here are going to be similar within those standards. So we have counting skills, number recognition, geometry, spatial concepts and positional concepts, patterns, sorting, grouping, estimation, measurement, including graphing, and time and money, which would be for very advanced children. So what I want to do on this slide is just talk a little bit about these different areas of math knowledge, because it's so important in order for you to incorporate math into activities in a meaningful way. You need to understand the skills that fall under this area of math knowledge. So obviously counting skills is exactly what it says, right? Being able to count. There's a difference, however, between being able to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and counting in succession, and being able to count the members of a set. So for instance, you give them, 4 crackers on a plate and say, how many crackers do you have? And they can count and figure out that there are 4. So again, remember what I said earlier, that there's a building process that goes on. You obviously have to know that 2 comes after 1 and that 3 comes after 2 to be able to count in order. And then you have to be able to count in order to be able to count those crackers on that plate. So because a lot of you are working with a mixed age group, you have children at all different levels, right? You're going to have children who are just beginning to be able to count in order, right? And then you're going to have those who you could put 4 crackers on their plate and say, how many crackers did I give you today, or how many are we having for snack? And they would be able to count them. The beauty of those of you working with a mixed age group is that those who are just learning to count, or learning what it even means to count, will learn by listening to those who are able to count those 4 crackers. All right, so they serve as role models, which is powerful for them as well. Okay. Number recognition, we talked a little bit about this earlier. So knowing that what a number 3 looks like, what a number 4 looks like, what a number 5 looks like. But before you can get to that point, you have to know what the heck a number is. That's the first step, right? You can't recognize a number 3 till you know what a number is, and why do we have numbers, and what does it mean? So again, there's that building process. Geometry encompasses things like shapes, and obviously your 2-dimensional shapes like circle, triangle, rectangle, square. But then as children get more advanced, getting into 3-dimensional shapes like spheres and rectangular prisms, cylinders, cones. And that may sound really, really like, wow, that's really complicated, but not really. If you teach the children from day one that a ball is a sphere and not a circle, they will know that. And it will not be this big idea, right? The concept of three-dimensional versus two-dimensional is much more complex, but the fact that a ball is a sphere and not a circle, that's just, if you teach them that's what it's called, that's what it's called. They'll learn that. Spatial concepts and positional concepts, like I just described in the game, over, under, between, through, around, all of those are positional concepts. Next to, your spatial concepts have to do with your body and relation to other people or things. So you're standing next to your friend Jose, or you are behind the couch, wherever you are. I mean, their actual body physically in space. Patterns and patterning, where you create a pattern, you copy a pattern, you extend. Copying is the easiest. So you might have a row of blocks. You have red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, and the children take more blocks and they line them up and make a pattern that looks just like yours, right? Then you extend that pattern. So you would say, read the pattern together. Let's say the pattern together. Red, blue, red, blue, red, blue. What comes next? And they say red, and they keep it going. And then finally, more advanced than that is creating their own pattern. You give them the blocks and they create their own pattern. Sorting and grouping, exactly what it sounds like. Children will start very at the beginning, where you might sort, let's say we're just going to use crayons. You sort them by color, right? That's the easiest way to sort them, would be by color. They don't even necessarily need to know the names of the colors. They're going to sort them based on what looks the same. Then you might get into more advanced students might choose to sort the crayons new versus used crayons, or big versus little crayons, or fat versus thin crayons, and they can sort it on a different characteristic. All right, and not necessarily by color, right? You might have a whole pile of used crayons and a whole pile of new crayons, but they're going to be all different colors within those. So then you could sort them even further. So sort by used and new, and then sort by color after that, or by length, or by width. Measurement, including graphing. So that can be measurement that is actual measurement with more advanced children using a ruler, tape measure, yardstick. But it can also be measurement using what I call non-standard measurement. In other words, how many blocks long is the table? And the children would take blocks that are the same length, same width, line them up, and use those blocks to measure how long the table is. That's what I call non-standard measurement. How many steps does it take you to get from the door to the chair? Okay. And then time and money. Time and money, having taught kindergarten and first grade, are extremely difficult concepts for children to comprehend. Time is easier, obviously, using a digital clock, but you still need to be able to recognize numerals, including larger numerals. Money is very complicated. You start with pennies because you count by one. Then usually you go to dimes because counting by 10 is easier than counting by fives, and then counting by 20. So when you think about how complicated money is, it's no wonder that you started in kindergarten and a lot of children haven't mastered counting change for quite a long while. And heck, I know some adults that have a struggle with counting change. So it's a skill that you definitely have to start and build and build and build upon, like all of these are, okay? So hopefully this gives you a really solid understanding of the different areas of math knowledge, and I encourage you to go to your state standards and look at, for different ages, what they're looking for, okay? Because it's going to vary, and again, it's going to build. What they're going to expect for a toddler within even counting skills is going to be very different than what they're looking for when you get to maybe a 4-year-old, okay? Does that make sense? All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to practice what we just learned. So we have a little girl here, and she's playing with some blocks, some wooden blocks. And what I would like you to do is I would like you to look at the picture and look at, I gave you all the different areas of math knowledge at the top there. And I want you to put into the question box which math concept she is actually working on as she plays with the blocks.
Okay, we have got grouping, geometry, sorting and grouping, counting, sorting, grouping, patterning, sorting, patterning, it's spatial concepts, counting, patterning, um, several counting and sorting and patterning. All of them technically. Positional concepts, all but number recognition, counting, sorting, grouping, patterning, patterns, positional concepts, sorting, and sizing. Those are all good answers.
Absolutely. And the point being here is that absolutely, there's a lot going on and she's just simply playing, right? And if you engage with her and ask some questions, then you can add in even more skills if you feel like she's ready for it. For instance, you might choose to ask, oh, well, it looks like you separated out all the red blocks. How many red blocks are in that group? Or you might ask, I see lots of different colors there. What color a block is beside the blue block? Or I see a pattern. What pattern did you make? I mean, that's where you come into play because you engage and you ask questions. You could even incorporate number recognition if you had some paper and a pencil and she could say, oh, I have 4 red blocks, and you could write a numeral on there and maybe it's not the number 4 and say, well, was that the right number? Did I write the right number? And she would say, no, that's not right. That's a 3. That's not a 4. Because she may or may not be ready. I can't tell from this picture if she's a 3 or a 4-year-old, but she may not be ready to write the numerals herself, but she may be able to recognize them. Okay, because writing them obviously takes longer than being able to recognize a numeral. Great, awesome. We're going to practice again. All right, so your challenge now is to make math fun. So we're going to use this picture as a catalyst for you to put on your thinking caps. And if you've printed out the PowerPoint presentation and you want to turn back to the slide of all the different math areas, feel free to do so. But your challenge is to look at this. We'll just say you took a trip to the pumpkin patch. I know pumpkin season is coming to a close, but pumpkin patches are still fun. And what areas of math and how could you incorporate them in a trip to the pumpkin patch? So for instance, if you took this child to the pumpkin patch or your group to the pumpkin patch, how could you maybe explore geometry, or maybe incorporate spatial concepts or positional concepts? So I know, and that's the point, is that there are many different areas, obviously, you could address. So pick one and write down in the question box how you would address that particular area or areas. If you would like us to also unmute you, since it seems to be working tonight, you may raise your hand and we will try to unmute you, and we'll do just maybe if we get a lot of people, we'll probably only do maybe just 2 of them because we don't want to go too long tonight. But yeah, you can raise your hand if you'd like to share your idea out loud. That'd be great.
Okay, great. We have already some responses: size, bigger versus smaller, measuring, estimating which is heavier compared to the size, sorting different sizes, comparing size of pumpkins or compare size weighing pumpkins, adding the amounts, big, little, heavy, light. And we have some hands raised, so I'm going to try to get to a couple of those. We have so many responses. This is so great. Let's see, hold on. I know I just saw some hands. I have to scroll through. All right, Rosie Grosso, I'm going to unmute you, Rosie. So you need to unmute yourself, Rosie.
Okay.
Hey,
Okay.
Rosie, we can hear you.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, we could do sorting by size.
Yes, absolutely. Great idea. Thanks, Rosie.
Thank you.
Okay. I've got another one. Jasmine. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce your last name. Jasmine.
Hello?
Hi,
Yes,
Jasmine.
Hi, can you hear me?
We
we
can.
can.
Oh, okay. I will do the positional concept. All the kids can pick out, nice small size pumpkin and ask them to put it, on the left side of them and on the right and in between their legs and placing it near their belly like a positional thing.
That'd be
Oh,
a
that's
great.
great.
They'd have fun with that for sure. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing.
And
Thank you.
Jasmine will get you muted, and we got one more. 1 second. Let me scroll through here and get this. Bear with me 1 second. These screens are so small where I have to mute and unmute. But I've got one more. Darlene Henderson. Darlene Henderson. If you unmute yourself, I think we should hear you. Darlene? Darlene, can you hear us? Okay, that's okay. We'll keep moving, but maybe there's something wrong. But anyway, let's see. Let me just check the answers below and see if there's counting how many smaller and larger pumpkins concept, stacking pumpkins. So anyway, measure around the pumpkins and
Mm-hmm.
our heads. Sort from the smallest to the largest. Counting skills. Could a child count with longer stems?
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Great
And sorting
idea.
different colors and lengths. So all those are great answers. Thank you.
Everybody really must have their thinking caps on tonight.
Yeah.
So
Those
here
are
are some
great.
things that I was thinking of when I looked at that picture, and some of you actually came up with exactly the same things. One of the things I thought for counting skills was count the number of pumpkins that fit in the wagon. There was not a wagon in the picture, but a lot of times with pumpkin patches, wagons go hand in hand. So that was something I came up with for counting skills, which could also be estimation too. Before you put them in the wagon, you could estimate how many you think are going to fit in the wagon. Number recognition, talk about numbers while reading the prices of pumpkins, because at most pumpkin patches, they are not free. Geometry, what shape is a pumpkin? Is it a circle? No, it's a sphere, although not a perfect sphere. Spatial concepts and positional concepts. I like the idea of playing the game with the pumpkins. That would be a lot of fun. But you could also talk about where pumpkins grow. They grow on the ground. They do not grow up in a tree or under a bush. Well, they might, I guess, if the vines went under the bush. But you could talk about where the pumpkins are growing. Patterns, those small gourd pumpkins, I think it was Jasmine was talking about using for playing the game, would be great for making patterns, orange and white, because they come in different, and some of them are speckled or bumpy. You could even do smooth and bumpy. Sorting them by size, big and small, big, medium, and small, depending on the age, the developmental level of the children in your group. Someone estimating how much a pumpkin weighs, how much different pumpkins weigh, and comparing the weights of pumpkins if you have more advanced children. I know someone mentioned this about using a tape measure to measure the circumference of the pumpkins, and then you could graph those results if you're working with more advanced children. And time and money, how long does it take to get to the pumpkin patch? You could estimate the time, and then you could actually track the time using a watch or a smartphone. And then how much do pumpkins cost? And the children could actually help count out the money to buy the pumpkins. So the point of this was that a simple trip to a pumpkin patch, and that doesn't even include all the other areas of development like gross motor skills, fine motor skills, creative arts, social studies, science. I mean, that doesn't include any of those, right? This is simply math. So the point being that a simple trip to the pumpkin patch can be a way for you to address many, many different areas of math knowledge. You guys did a great job. So we're going to do it again. All right, now we're going to blow some bubbles. So again, pick at least one of the skills on that chart and how you would develop it by blowing bubbles with the children, which is something I think that all children love, are bubbles.
And if you'd like to share your thoughts, we'd certainly just raise your hand if you want us to unmute you. So we've already got counting. How many bubbles can you blow in 10 seconds? understanding what 10 seconds is. The size
Mm-hmm.
of the bubbles. How many each child popped.
Excellent.
Estimating how far a bubble goes before it pops. Counting the bubbles. Positioning, speed of breath. How many bubbles and chart who blew the most.
That would be fun.
Making your own mix, measuring as you make your
Mm-hmm.
mix, and compare with what recipe works the best. So that would be great with your after schooler. Sizes, spatial concept, large and small bubbles, and counting in order. Let's see if we have any hand raised that anybody wants to join or share your. I have no hand raised. Okay, we'll just keep reading some of the things because when, talk about when, catching
Mm-hmm.
the bubbles, positional concepts, big and small bubbles, positional, see how many bubbles go up or down,
Mm-hmm.
estimate how many bubbles and the size of the bubbles. Where did the bubbles go? Oh, that's a great question. Okay, those are all good.
Excellent. You guys are really on the ball tonight. Some of them you again came up with exactly what I came up with. So for counting skills, you could count out loud, and this is especially important if you're working with younger ones that are just beginning to understand what counting means. So as they pop the bubbles, you could count them, or you could have your more advanced children count as they pop. But that will expose, say, your toddlers, twos, and even young threes to what it means to count. Number recognition. So you put some number cards in a bag, you shake up the bag, you pull out a number, and then the children have to identify the number and then pop that many bubbles. Okay, so that would be for those children who are working on recognizing the numerals and already have an understanding of what it means when they see the numeral 3, that means 3, 1, 2, 3. Geometry, what shape is the bubble? Spatial concepts, where do the bubbles go? Up in the air, down the ground, over the bush, under your hand, etc. Again, with that, you're going to be describing the bubbles for those children who are on the developmentally younger age. So toddlers, twos, young threes. Wow, that bubble just went way over the bush. Or you just pop that bubble and it with your hand on top and your other hand on the bottom, or however you describe it. But the point being that you're going to give words to their actions. Patterns. Make patterns while popping. Pop with your hand, pop with your hand, pop with your foot. So make it an actual pattern with a physical aspect, right? Sorting and grouping, different types of bubble wands. Somebody mentioned this also with different solutions. You know, which bubble wands work better? Try making some of your own bubble wands. Estimation. How many bubbles do you think you will be able to blow with one breath? I think somebody mentioned something similar to that. Measurement. Use a tape measure to measure how far a bubble goes before it pops. And that would have to be a long tape measure in some cases. And then time and money. Use a stopwatch. Most smartphones now have a stopwatch feature to see how long it takes for a bubble to pop. That would be a good one to put estimation with too. For your older children, for your more developmentally advanced children, they could estimate how many seconds they think it's going to take for the bubble to pop and then compare their estimates to the actual results. Great job. Again, the point being for you to see that in any simple experience like blowing bubbles, you can integrate many, many different aspects of math. And is anybody going to be terrorized by this kind of math? Like someone mentioned when we talked about their negative aspects, absolutely not. They're playing, they're having a good time. They don't even realize how much math they're using as they're playing.
Beth, I do want to share one comment that someone sent. It's not necessarily with math, but I think it's a great comment. It says, problem solving because we know kids fight about how many bubbles each person popped. So problem solving about how to make that fit. I thought that was a great comment. Not necessarily math, but very good observation.
But problem solving is a huge part of math. So in essence, yes, that absolutely does fit in there. And you are right, especially as they get older, they get very competitive about who can pop the most bubbles. So what we're going to do now is talk about one of the most challenging aspects of anyone who's in family child care and having a mixed age group. And that age group is obviously chronological ages, meaning you have a baby, a 2-year-old, and a 4-year-old, but also developmental levels, right? So even if you had a homogeneous group of all 3-year-olds, let's say, you know that they're not all on the same level, and they aren't all on the same level in math or in language or in any other area. And that's what makes things so challenging. And there's only one of you, right, in a lot of cases, and you don't have a lot of help. So what we're going to talk about now is how you can take simple experiences and you can adapt them to different developmental levels. And then after we finish out this PowerPoint, I'm going to take you into our curriculum so you can see how we do that and give you some more ideas on how you can do that as you work with children when you're leveling different experiences. So we're going to do water bottle bowling. That's a mouthful. So for this experience, you would need 10 plastic water bottles and a ball. And for toddlers and twos, you would set up the bottles and count out loud as you did them. So your role in any experience when working with young children is super important because you are, especially with toddlers and twos, you're modeling language the entire time. All right. So as you set up the water bottles, you're going to talk and count. I mean, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 as you're arranging them. And then as they fall over, you can count, whoa, you just rolled the ball and look, 1, 2, 3, 4 fell over, and you touched the bottles as you know that fell over. You can talk about the shape of the ball, that it's a sphere, again, exposing them to that idea. Positional concepts. The ball rolls on the floor, the bottles fall over, some bottles are behind others when setting them up. So again, when you're working with toddlers and twos, and even if you have some threes that are younger threes who are maybe developmentally more on the 2 level, your role, especially if they're not very verbal, is to model that language, right? You're exposing them to these ideas. Are they going to be able to count those bottles for you? No, absolutely not. That would not be developmentally appropriate at all. But what you are doing is you're exposing them to the idea of what counting is and that there's these things called numbers. And I'm going to count as I put the bottles up, and you're exposing them to that idea. So then if you have threes and fours, they can help set up the bottles. They can count with you if needed as they set them up. Each time they roll the balls, they can count how many are standing and how many fell down with your assistance if needed or on their own. They can talk about the shape of the ball, noting that it's a sphere and not a circle. An interesting way to help children understand the concept of sphere and circle. And again, the concept of 3-dimensional versus 2-dimensional is very complex, but the idea that a ball is a sphere and a paper plate is not, is a circle, is easier to grasp, is to have them try to roll a paper plate to knock down the bottles. And they will find out very quickly that that is not going to be an easy task to do. Again, utilizing those positional concepts words as they're playing, but incorporate more advanced ones like around, between, and even left and right. Left and right are really complex for children to grasp also. Even into kindergarten, it's sometimes hard for them to remember left and right. But again, if you're just exposing them to that at this stage, eventually over time, they will begin to grasp what it means for something to be to the left or to the right. And if you wanted to incorporate patterns, you could use like Sprite or 7-Up bottles, which are green, and then arrange them in a pattern. So clear, green, clear, green, clear, green, and they could arrange them in any way they wanted, not the traditional, necessarily the traditional way of setting up the pins. They might choose to put them all in a straight line and roll the ball and see what happens that way. That's the fun of it, is let them take it in any direction that they want. All right, and then the advanced preschooler. Oh, Sherry, did you have something to say?
Well, I did, but I'm going to let you finish this, and then there's a question on the table I'll read to you after you
Okay.
finish.
All right. So advanced preschoolers, they can do obviously lots of things, right? So they can set up the pins, they obviously could count them, but one thing you can expose them to are addition and subtraction. So as they are playing this game, if you feel like they're ready to be exposed to what it means to add and subtract, you could have them set up the pins, they could roll the ball. Then they could count how many fell down and either write it as a subtraction fact. You had 10 pins, 4 of them fell down, 6 are left standing. and expose them to what that means. Or you could do it as an addition fact where you have 3 that fell down, 7 still standing, and that equals 10. And again, only if they're ready for that. This might be children who are getting ready to go to kindergarten, or maybe even those who are in kindergarten, right? Talking about the sphere again. Can they think of other objects that are like a sphere? Maybe they want to try rolling them. Say a bath poof. That's kind of sort of like a sphere. Would it work as well as a ball? Before rolling the ball, challenge them to estimate the number they think will fall and then compare the estimates to the actual results. And they could also add measurement for these children where they use a tape measure to measure the distance from where they roll the ball. So maybe they roll the ball from 5 feet and they see what happens. And they roll the ball from 10 feet and they see what happens. And they go 15 feet and they see what happens, and see how that distance changes, how accurately they are able to roll the ball. So the point being here is you could have this experience going on with your mixed age group, and everybody could be doing it in a little bit different way. Yeah, you might want to end up having more than one set of water bottles and balls so that your toddlers and your twos can be just kind of messing around, because you know how they are. They kind of do their own thing. Whereas if you want to really work with your more advanced children, you might want to have another set for them to use themselves. But luckily, water bottles seem to be an easy thing to get a hold of, especially if you ask parents or guardians to send them in. So you could easily do that. But the point is that you can adapt things for different developmental levels. And it's really important to keep in mind that you might have a 3-year-old who's functioning more like a 4 in this area, and is really ready to do some counting and maybe even can identify some numerals. But you also might have a 3-year-old who is not, and who is more like a 2-year-old, and who is just beginning to understand, that 2 comes after 1 and 3 comes after 2, and really beginning to understand that you can count things in the first place. So you have to kind of know your children and know how you can adapt and modify. All right, Sherry, what was that question you had? I'll be happy to answer it.
It's pretty appropriate for the area that you just covered, but it's what's a good way to gauge how well children are absorbing the information versus repeating or just memorizing?
It's a very good question. I think observation is the best answer there. When you ask a child and it's a directed question, and we all know that you have to do your assessments with them, obviously, but anecdotal notes, and when you're observing children playing, will tell you more about what they know, than asking them, like, when you're testing them. Now, that being said, when you're engaging with them, like let's say you have a child who is playing with a Play-Doh and they're making balls with the Play-Doh, and some of the balls they're making are bigger than other ones. You can ask open-ended questions like, tell me about the balls that you're making with the Play-Doh, and see what they have to say. Or, how are those balls the same and how are they different? And see if they describe the size difference, or see if they even use the word sphere, for instance, instead of ball, right? Those would be ways that you could evaluate how well a child has absorbed and not just memorized. And it's just like when I was teaching in kindergarten, and I would have parents that would say their child already knows everything there is to know about the alphabet because they can sing the ABC song. Well, we all know that's a different learning mechanism. That's memorizing, right? It's a song. And so they're memorizing the words just like you would to Jingle Bells or some other song. Being able to identify the letters and then understand that letters get put together in words is a totally different concept than singing the ABC song. And that's the same thing here when you talk about counting, right? A lot of children can rote count in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But if you ask them and you put those crackers on that plate and you say how many crackers are on your plate, they aren't there yet. Okay, so I think in answer to your question, the best way is to observe and to ask open-ended question as children engage in free play or in open-ended experiences, and that way you'll have a really good idea what they actually know versus what they're just repeating. Does that make
And
sense?
I hope so. You can respond, the person that sent that. But the next one is, how long do you recommend an activity to maintain fun and focus, but to still make sure that they are getting the concept?
Well, I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is this is not a one and done. All right. Math and math knowledge is just like every other skill, like learning to walk, learning to talk, learning to use the potty. It takes a lot of practice. It takes what they call scaffolding, which means you build upon and you build upon and you build upon and you build upon. So I think the key here is to remember that when you're doing any experience that has math involved with it, they're not going to master it the first time, and they might not master it the second, well, they won't master it the second time, and it might not even be mastered in the 20th time, right? Because it is also very developmental. And it's just like, again, when I was teaching kindergarten and people would, parents would be like, when are they going to read? When are they going to read? And I would say, when they're ready to read. And you cannot make it happen sooner rather than later. But what you can do is you can set the stage so that they have a lot of exposure to these ideas. And then over time and over, through multiple different ways of counting, through games and activities and cooking and all sorts of other things, they will begin to develop those skills, and they will become truly learned versus just memorized.
And I also think that when they still show engagement and they still show interest, then you want to continue the activity also. It's kind of like I tell my husband, you can't tell, our kids are grown, but you can't tell them just one time. They're not going to get it. That's why you have managers in business. If everybody got it the first time, we wouldn't need teachers and managers.
That is so true.
All right, sorry. All right, that's it.
Does anybody have any more questions regarding this PowerPoint? Because I want to, oh, it's almost after 8 here. I want to move on, but I want to make sure that I don't have any questions on any of the content that was in the PowerPoint presentation so far. Those were great questions, by the way. Thanks for asking them.
I think we're good.
Okay.
No questions right now.
All right, so I'm going to, and just bear with me a second. Oh, I didn't go to my question slide. All right, I am just going to shut this and I'm going to pop over here. I know we have a mix of people because we've launched a poll at the beginning of the webinar of those of you who are customers of GWiz, maybe you're past customers of GWiz and you're not currently, and those of you who are not, or you might be quality specialists. So what I've just did with that click, click, click was I'm now on our website. And there's a reason why I'm here is I want to go into some of our teaching guides and talk about, again, some more about how you can incorporate math and address those multiple ages, because we know that that's a big challenge. So our website is simply gwizeducation.com. Everything that GWiz does lives here on this website, unlike other curriculums that you may be familiar with. If you're not a customer, we don't ship anything, we don't print anything. It's up to you what you want to print. It's up to you if you want to print it at all, or we do a lot of digital pieces and parts that can be, for instance, emailed to parents or guardians. But what I want to do is I want to actually sign in and go to our units for this month of November and go into the lesson plans and use some of the experiences in there to give you some more practice with leveling experiences. And again, we would love for you to raise your hand if you have ideas to share, and we're going to use the question box. So because everything is on here, I'm just going to log in, and hopefully I will remember my password. If not, I'd have to have Sherry look it up. Oh no. Let me try it without a capital, or maybe I just typed it too fast.
Oh, Beth. Okay, hold on. It'll take me just a second.
That's okay. Let me try something else here. See if I get locked out. If not, I'll go into the sample. There we go. I had a capital lock on. I'm sorry. That was my fault. See, now it is case
That's a
sensitive. Now
very
you know.
Please note that when you have your passwords and your username and you don't have your caps lock on, make sure that's turned off.
All right, so I'm going to go over here to this much month's units, and this was one of the reasons we chose this topic, is because our topics for those of you who don't know, we do 2 units each month. Our first one is we can count, and our second one is shape, shape, shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by going into we can count. We do have English and Spanish files. I do not speak Spanish, so I'm going into the English version. If I go to the Spanish version, it's not going to turn out so well. And I'm going to go to our teacher's guide. And this unit is really designed to expose children to the concept that we all use math every day in many different ways. So this is not a unit where we're going to spend a day on the number 1, the number 2, the number 3, the number 4. We don't do that. And we don't do that in any of our units. We incorporate math just like we went through in the PowerPoint within the activities that we do. So this one, I'm going to go to, I have some pages that I want to skip to here. So just bear with me while I get to those pages. We always have an introduction, and our lesson plans are two pages per day. And I'll just talk about that briefly, but then I want to move on to the actual experience. So for those of you who are not familiar, because it's not fair to you not to explain what I'm doing, so you're totally confused. Each unit that GWiz writes is 10 days of activities, and each day has 2 pages that goes with it. We have health and safety tips, teaching tips and transition ideas every day. We have a box to help you model language with the children. Our exploring together is like a circle time, but not. Instead of it being just a teacher directed, it's very hands-on, and everybody's doing something, not just sitting and listening. And we build questions like I was just talking about when you're trying to evaluate what the children learn, what they already know, where they are developmentally. We build those kind of questions into the lesson plans themselves. But what I want to do is scoot to the second part of day 1, where we have our center experiences that you'll see here and here. And one of them I want to focus on right here is called playing with numerals. So we all know as adults, right, that numerals are a big part of our world. You know, there are numbers on everything. So what I wanted you to do here in this experience was gather things like toy telephones or old cell phones, toy cash registers, calculators, computer keyboards, anything that has numerals, right? And you're just going to set those up in your dramatic play area, or you could set it up as an exploration station, I call them, where you just have all these things out all over the table. Oh, sorry, my computer does that. And then depending on the developmental levels of the children in your group, we have different ideas on how they may approach this experience and your role in that, okay? So for instance here, with the toddlers and the 2s, you know how they love to push buttons, right? So as they're playing and you're engaging with them, you can talk about the numerals as they push the buttons. Oh, you just pushed the button that had the number 4, or you just pushed the button that has the number 8, or wow, look, you're pushing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buttons. Again, modeling, right? And exposing. Then your 3s and your 4s may be able to name some of the numerals they see, especially like when they get to be 4 and they know what that 4 looks like, because when they're 4, I'm 4, you know, and they know they can show you 4 fingers and they know what the number 4 looks like. So you can talk about the numerals. See if this would be a perfect example of a time when you're just engaging and you're asking questions, but you're not really leading anything. And as they're playing, you can talk about, oh, do you see any numerals on there that are your age? Because you're 4, right? Or you could be really silly and say, oh, you're 8, right? Can you find an 8? Because you're 8 years old, right? And they'd be like, no, I'm not 8, I'm 4. You know, they're so cute when they're that age. So again, there's ways to evaluate kind of where they are in a way that's very fun. And then they can use those things to pretend to call like their mommy or their daddy or their grandma or their aunt, or maybe they're going to pretend they're at work and they could type on the keyboard like they've seen, you know, their mom or dad do. And then your more advanced preschoolers, this is the perfect time to talk about their phone numbers, right? So that's a really important numeral, an example of how we use numbers in our daily lives, and knowing their phone number is really important, especially today's world where a lot of people don't have a landline at home, and the numbers they need to know are really their parents' or guardian cell phone numbers. And we also within this unit talk about 911, because again, important numerals that we all need to know, that combination of numerals 911 is super important, and there's a reason why. So that's an example of like how you could set up the environment, and then you could use that in many different ways given different ages within your group. Okay, so that's one example. I'm going to go down here to, and just bear with me, because when I have the toolbar open for GoToWebinar, I cannot see my cursor on the side to grab it and pull it down. So it just takes a few seconds. I don't want to make anybody really dizzy. But for those of you who aren't familiar, while I'm scrolling, the days go through here. It's not dated, just day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7, etc. And it goes on like that for 10 days. So here's an example again of how you can incorporate math within a unit or within your daily lesson plans or whatever, is you're combining literature and math. So for instance, the Three Bears. Okay, a perfect story for reinforcing the numeral 3. Obviously, 3 bears, 3 bowls, 3 chairs, 3 beds. So anyway, this day these activities are related to the 3 bears, and one of the experiences here is called 3 for Tea. All right, so in 3 for Tea, you're gonna, just like we did in that other experience, set out 3 bears or plush animals, 3 plastic bowls, 3 spoons, 3 napkins, 3 toy teacups, etc., etc., etc. So I'm covering up down here because we have given you some different ideas in the lesson plans of how you could adapt this open-ended dramatic play experience for, developmentally toddlers 2s, 3s, 4s. But what I want to do is I want you all to share, if you were going to set up this experience, let's say you had read the 3 bears and you acted out the 3 bears, and now you're going to set up the environment where you're going to give them 3 of these different things, and then just watch and see what happens. How could you, with different developmental levels, adapt this experience? So pick an age and a developmental age, toddlers, 3s, whatever, and then explain in the question box or raise your hand how you would adapt this experience, or what your expectations would be for the different levels within this one experience, 3 for Tea.
That would be a good one if someone wanted to raise their hand, and I can unmute you. Don't have any yet. That's a tough question, Beth. So it would take them a few minutes. We need to give them a few minutes to get their thoughts together. Oh, we've got some hands raised.
Perfect.
Shara Byers-Gillen is your last name. I'm going to unmute you, and Shara, if I believe I'm pronouncing your name. Shara, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
And we can hear you.
Yay.
Hi.
Hi.
So I actually do this activity with a few of my toddler twos, like my older ones to younger threes, so really like my 2-year-olds. And we use like the Montessori bears, like the little ones that look like little gummy bear toys.
Mm-hmm.
And they come in different rainbow colors.
Right.
So we set up different things like with the Montessori bears, and then we have like play food. So we just kind of like assign each bear the play food, but we also do it like with the colors, because they seem to be very focused on the fact that like the rainbow colors and differentiate. So we have like 3 different sets of bears. So we have like the yellow group of bears, and they have one particular snack, and the red group of bears, and they have a different snack. And then whatever the other third color is, and their snack. And we talk about basically what each bear has to eat and how they can share with the other bear group. So how many, let's say it's like pizza, how many slices of pizza do the yellow bears have? How could they share it with the red bears? How many apples do the red bears have? How can they share it with the yellow bears and the green bears? And I'm the one actually that asked the other two questions about how do you make sure that they're absorbing the information versus just memorizing or repeating it. Because what I find is that they do have a lot of fun doing this activity, but I'm not sure if they understand the exchange of like grouping numbers, like, okay, like sharing, giving each color, like they need two here because it's two bears there, and this group needs two slices there, versus just kind of like, playing around with the toys and seeing that we're sectioning things off. Like, to me, it seems more like they're absorbing the concept of sharing, not necessarily the concept of numbers.
And that's okay, because that's developmentally where they are right now. And
Okay.
and the rest will come into place when they're ready. But the idea that everybody has a fair share is actually what you're doing is one-to-one correspondence, right? And that is a math concept. And eventually that will turn into, all right, I have two bears that are yellow. How many, pieces of pizza do we need for these bears? And they'll be able to say two, and they'll really understand what two is. But what you're doing is you're building that foundation right now, is you're getting them ready for that. And honestly, that's right where they should be. And you're doing, you're giving them the idea that you can actually count things. Like, you're exposing them to the concept of counting, and eventually they'll get to the point where they'll count it themselves.
Okay, because I'm always trying to make sure that it's very relatable. So I often use things like food or toys. Like, I
Yep.
use sharing
Oh
a lot
yeah.
just because that makes it relatable to kids. They don't really think of it as like numbers and how do they use numbers in everyday life, except for when they're sharing a toy or when we're breaking down snacks, or, how many toys do we take out into the yard. So I'm always just curious, like, just make sure that they're understanding that it's more than sharing, that, it is a very real concept with numbers that they will use, going forward. They will eventually need to count money. They will eventually need to budget. They will eventually need to actually share their pizza with their kids the way that
Yes,
I
they
share with them.
will. They will. And what you're doing though is you're building that foundation by talking about it and counting things out loud. And, oh, look, today we got out 4 riding toys. Now let's put them away. 1 away, 2 away, 3 away, 4 away. And over time they will begin to understand what that means. So it just takes time. It's, again, just like learning to read, use the potty, everything else. It takes time and repetition and what they call scaffolding and building upon that. So great. But thanks so much for sharing. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Shara. We've got one more hand raised, Jasmine. Let's see. Let me unmute you, Jasmine.
Hi, I'm here. How are you?
Hi, good.
Hey, Jasmine.
Hi. So, in regards to the 3 for tea, the concept with the 3 plush bears and the plastic bowls, spoons, and stuff. I'll actually kind of set up like a you first do this and that, and for the more advanced preschoolers, I will tell them, like, okay, we first set the first bear up, then you put on the plate, then you set up the cup, and kind of do like a pattern, and then I have them then to move on to the next bear to kind of set up a tea party amongst the bears, and they will just have a step by step. So I will probably show like a visual on a piece of paper. Will say the first thing you do, the second thing you do, the third thing you do, the fourth thing, and to create a place setting for each bear, and then they move on to the next bear.
And that's actually right, and that's actually sequencing, right? So you're talking about first, next, last, which is putting, and also with more advanced children, following a multi-step direction. I mean, that's a big skill, right? Is, listen to what I'm saying and then do it in that order.
Right.
And that's hard for some children. Thanks for sharing.
For some adults.
Yeah, that too. You're right. Thanks for sharing.
No problem. For sure. Thank you. Okay, so let me read some of the responses that we've got. Okay, so Papa Bear size, Mama Bear size, and Baby Bear size. I guess making sure you have all that as you're looking at the activity. Sorting out first, seconds, and thirds and the storyline. 4-year-olds would use the bears in dramatic play and could count and sort plates and food.
Mm-hmm.
Um, okay, bring books to life, use materials to create a scene, and interact as you build your scene. So all those are good.
Excellent.
4-year-olds, have them set out the items for the one-to-one correspondence, then take turns pretending to pour tea, and they could also count to 3 or some other number as they're relating those activities. It's good.
Great. Very good. I'm going to scroll down so y'all can see what we had in here. That the toddlers, twos, and young threes will probably want to feed the bears, and they're going to play side by side, keeping your expectation. If this is totally child directed and you're not involved, the best thing that you can do again is just to engage in conversation. And that doesn't necessarily mean directing the whole thing as much as it is talking about what they're doing. Oh, you put 2 pieces of food on that bear's plate, or you gave 1 cup to that bear, but that bear doesn't have any cup yet. Can you give 1 cup to that bear too? So talking, a lot of talking. And then as you mentioned, I think quite a few of you mentioned about doing the one-to-one correspondence. Each bear needs 1 cup and 1 bowl and 1 spoon. And that is also an important math concept. Very good. So again, we're in the teaching guide for our We Can Count unit. I'm going to back out of there just really quickly because there are a lot of components that go with GWIS curriculum, and those of you who are familiar with our curriculum know all of this. But there are story props. This one is actually a hopping frogs story that is a counting story. So like we would give you the props to help tell the story. And then our second unit is about shapes. Which you would scroll down here. And again, what you would find is what we just looked at, is that in our curriculum, and this is what I want you to walk away from this webinar learning, is that math can be a part really almost of every single experience that you do in some way, shape, or form. It might mean that you have to take more of an active role, not necessarily leading the experience, but engaging in that conversation back and forth with children, or just describing, like I just said with the toddlers and the nonverbals, their actions, to expose them to concepts. And keeping in mind that math is what I just said, it is a very important skill, but it is a skill that takes time, and it also is very developmental. So numerals, for instance, are abstract symbols, and it takes a while for a child to begin to connect the dots that abstract symbol actually matches up to those 4 crackers on that plate, right? And so being patient, and also I know sometimes especially parents and guardians can be very like, when are they going to learn to do this, and when are they going to learn to do that, and are they going to be ready for kindergarten, and we need to know how to do these things. Just reinforcing for them that they are in fact doing these math skills, and they're doing them every day and in many different ways, and that they will have the knowledge they need when they get to kindergarten or to school to keep on progressing. But it's not a race. We will all get there eventually. I think that probably everyone on this call can count to 20 successfully, and we might even be able to count backwards if it's not too late in the evening. So I think we all turned out okay, and the children will as well. With that said, we are down now to almost like 5 minutes left, and what I would love to do is open it up for any questions. If you would like to raise your hand, we can unmute you. If you would like to type the question in the question box, that would be great too. The post-assessment link, Sherry did put a document here where you can download the Word document, and then the link is in the document, or I'm going to show you right now where to find that on our website. So it won't be active. Give me a few minutes because it's right now turned off. I have to turn it on. So when the webinar ends, give me a few minutes. I will turn it on. You complete the post assessment, and then we will send you via email a certificate of attendance. Give us a week to 10 days. If it's not there in a week to 10 days, let us know. Those of you in Pennsylvania who have registered in the registry, I will go in there after you've done your assessment and verify that you did it and check you off. But underneath the support tab right here, you're going to see this training webinar training videos live and recorded link. And if you click that and you scroll down, here's the webinar we're doing right now. And here's the handout to the PDF of the PowerPoint. And if you keep scrolling down and you click this button, once I'm actually activated this, it'll take you directly to the Google Forms post assessment. So again, just to reiterate, I went under, let me scroll back up here so you can see better. I went under the support tab and I went to webinar training videos and then scrolled down. We also have a lot of other videos of other webinars that we've done. And if you weren't with us for those, you're welcome to do that. So again, what I'd like to do right now is take any questions. We can unmute you. You can type in the question box, but I'd like to take the last few minutes just to talk a little bit about any questions anyone has.
Okay. All right. So here's a question. We not only do math and English, but also French, Spanish, and Cantonese, making different parts of the brain, but different parts, I believe, parts of the brain work. Would you suggest to continue this path?
That's a lot. Wow. That's a very good question. I don't know. I think that that's a lot, but it's also wonderful because children do absorb languages at a very young age much more readily. But I don't know if you're doing that many languages, if that could be confusing, especially when you have young ones who are just learning to master English, or maybe you have some dual language learners. If that's the case and you have dual language learners that, their home language is Cantonese, for instance, or Spanish or whatnot, then you almost do need to do all those different languages. Just keep in mind that math can be something that it's not like you're going to have math time, right? Think of it as math is going to be incorporated into the other experiences, just any experience, even when children are finger painting, right? So when they go to the finger paint and they choose colors, how many colors did they choose? Did they choose 1, 2, 3? Again, describing it for the younger ones or letting the older ones tell you how many colors they chose. Trying to think of it that way as opposed to just like another subject where, for instance, like in high school where you have English, social studies, you know what I mean? It's very segregated. Trying to think of it more integrated. But wow, that's a lot of languages. I would not do very well with that personally.
Okay, do you have, I believe the question is, do you have to have the GWIZ education, or do you have to be a subscriber in order probably to get the certificate, I'm assuming by the question. And no, you do not. You do have to do the post assessment, which will ask you for your email and your first and last name, or however how you want it on your certificate. We just have one question. I tried to do the assessment and I keep getting an error. The reason is that assessment, like Beth said, is not active until after the webinar, because really the assessment is about the webinar, so it pertains to, kind of what you've learned during this time.
Yeah, just give me a few minutes once we end here and I'll go out and activate it, and then it should be working within the next, once we end, give me 5 minutes and it should be working.
Okay, and then a question. Your curriculum is 2 10-day sections. What do you do when you need more than 20 days? SUTQ requires a full month.
Well, that's a very good question. And what I would encourage you to do is once we post these on the 20th of the month prior, so like these 2 November units were both posted on the 20th of October, is sit down and look at them, because there are many experiences in there. Say, for instance, that one we just did with the bears and the bowls and the plates, etc., that can be done for more than one day. And even the group experiences, for instance, like maybe we're doing Goldilocks and the Three Bears, but we only do it for 2 days, but your kids really like it. You could repeat an experience. So what I would encourage you to do, because there are months we know where you're going to have more than 20 days, is to just simply go through the teaching guide and think about, okay, which one of these do I feel like my children would really enjoy? And then just expand it and do it for more than one day. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And in fact, that's what we want you to do. We want you to continue the experiences the children enjoy, especially if it involves, like, maybe it's something that you had to set up and it took a while to prepare it. I mean, not a lot of while, but you did gather materials or you got it already and they really liked it, do it again. And just play it by ear too. When you get to the end of the unit, go back and repeat the days, some of the experiences that they really liked, or twist them up a little bit. So maybe instead of doing Goldilocks and the Three Bears on that day, add another plate. And oh my goodness, now there's 4. What happened? Now we have, instead of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, we have Goldilocks and the Four Bears, and just see how they roll with it. That would be my advice, would be just to pick up on the ones they really like and just do them again or slightly twist them up.
And we do have one comment as a customer. This person is a customer. She says you can easily expand each day and make a month out of the lessons easily. So from her experience. So I try to integrate all subjects in all our activities as they come up, but do you suggest a designated time for math during the day, or like the 100 book challenge, or the concept of reading 15 minutes a day at home? And if so, what is the at-home parent engagement assignment for this area?
Okay, first of all, 15 minutes a day, absolutely. All parents and guardians should be reading to their children every single day, at least 15 minutes. So that needs to just be something that is expected that they're doing, or should be expected that they're doing, and actually should be longer than that, but maybe not for the really little ones because they don't like to sit still that long. I like the 100-day book challenge. I like that because it's a way for them to be exposed to lots of different kinds of literature, but it also incorporates math. The 100-day is also a lot of fun, where you make a chain with paper, and every day you add a link to the chain and a link to the chain and a link to the chain, and it gets longer and longer. In kindergarten, when we did it, we would do the tens links with a different color of paper. So like maybe all the tens were white, and then we would do, like, the first set of 10 in red and then a white link, and then the second 10 in yellow or whatever, to get them exposed to the idea of counting by tens. But again, that was kindergarten, so that's, maybe or maybe not depending on your group. But I think that's a fun way to incorporate numerals and counting and math into other areas. And the parent engagement is simply letting them know, what it is. Are they going to help with the 100 book challenge, right? So, are you going to read all the 100 books with the children, in your program, or over the weekend? Are they each required to read 2 books? I mean, how do you want to do that? That's really up to you how you want to set that up. But I think it's a great way to get them involved. And also, we take it for granted, but things like books have page numbers. So there's even in reading, there's, even if it's not a book about numerals, there's numerals within every book. So, and if you messed up those page numbers, your story is not going to turn out so well.
I think her first question was, do you, where she tries to integrate all the subjects and all the activities, but do you suggest a designated time for math? I think what Beth is saying is that most all the activities can be related to math. And if you really sit down and think about it, you'd be surprised that maybe you don't have this 15 minutes each day, but you're probably integrating math in about everything you do during the day.
Yeah, I mean, in early childhood, I mean, I I tend to philosophically, and in Gee Whiz, we philosophically go with what you said initially, which was integrating all the subject areas into all the experiences instead of isolating them. That comes soon enough, trust me. When they get to kindergarten anymore, it's like it was in first grade, and the subjects get isolated out. And the reason the research says that that's not necessarily a good thing is because it doesn't relate to anything, right? So if you're reading the story of the 3 bears and you're counting how many bears are in the story, or you're pretending to be the 3 bears and you're, playing bowls and spoons, it's relatable, right? And it makes the understanding of what 3 means very meaningful, as opposed to, let's do a worksheet and color in 3 balls. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I hope,
Yeah.
to the person.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Those are all good questions. We're closing in past 8:30. If you have questions after we end the webinar tonight, please feel free to send them to customer service at GWIZ Education, or you can send them, yeah, best showing you right there. It's under the support tab where it says contact us. You must complete the assessment in order to get the certificate. And the assessment is never available until the webinar is over with. So if you tried it and it says contact the owner, it was not available until tonight. But again, if you have questions later, please send them to us. This webinar is being recorded. It will be available through a YouTube on our website probably by tomorrow sometime. So, and on that same page where Beth is showing you, we'll also, instead of saying registration link, you're going to probably say recording. And below that will be the links for the post assessment and the PowerPoint handout that Beth used tonight. So you've got access to all that if you did not get it downloaded ahead of time. But if there are no more questions, we are going to let you go tonight. We so appreciate, we've had just a great response and great responses from all of you and a great attendance. And I can see the attention, and it's been very strong tonight. So we appreciate you coming and can't wait to hear your comments and look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Beth?
Yeah, and there's a very short survey after we end
Oh, yeah.
here. It's like just 4 questions and they're multiple choice. Like it just gives us some feedback on the webinar, and we also have a question about next month. So if you would please complete those, that would be very helpful. And like I said, give me just a few minutes to go out there and activate the post assessment, and I will do that. If you have any questions or you have trouble with that after the fact, you can either go to the support under support tab to contact us, or you can email me at bsmith@gwizeducation.com. You should have gotten an email from me anyway yesterday, I believe it was, saying that this was getting really full, so you should have my email. But again, it's bsmith@gwizeducation.com. I'm happy to answer any questions. And with that said, Sherry, I think we'll say good night. I'm sure everybody's tired, especially with the time change. And thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.